There are protests that continue throughout downtown Los Angeles. Overnight, this time less violent than what we saw over the weekend. Fewer clashes reported yesterday with law enforcement as groups marched across the city in protest of the Trump administration's immigration raids. Despite that, the White House deployed another 2,000 National Guard troops, bringing the total number to 4,700 Marines also were activated. California Governor Gavin Newsom says the deployment of troops is unnecessary and only sows more fear and anger. He's also calling the president's decision to mobilize the Marines illegal, saying he will file a lawsuit against that move, just like he did for the National Guard troops yesterday. In that lawsuit, the state of California alleges the Trump administration violated both federal law and the Constitution, claiming the Defense Department did not communicate directly with the governor's office about deploying troops. President Trump, however, told reporters yesterday he does not regret sending in the National Guard.
We stopped it. We were able to make it much better, but it still looked pretty bad. And in watching clips last night, people were saying this is really a big problem. And until we went in, if we didn't do the job, that place would be burning down just like the houses burned down. There's so many different places where we let it burn. We want to be politically correct. We wanted to be nice. We want to be nice to the criminal. And what you're doing is destroying the fabric of our life in this country. No, we did the right thing.
We'll have much more on the lawsuit when California's Attorney General Rob Bonta joins us a little bit later this morning. Joining us now from Los Angeles, NBC News correspondent Camila Bernal. Camila, good morning. So we are hearing it was a little quieter overnight than it's been for the last several days in the streets of Los Angeles. Is that what you've been seeing?
It is, Willie. Good morning. And we could be entering day 5 of protests, but things are very calm right now as we ended day 4 of protests. It always tends to end with police declaring an unlawful assembly, meaning everyone has to be cleared out or else they're going to get arrested. So you have more peaceful streets right now. It's obviously 3 in the morning here in Los Angeles. There is still a large police presence in certain areas in downtown LA, and there is a lot of cleanup to do here. Business owners and, of course, local officials, because there was a lot of looting overnight. And when you do walk around some of the streets in downtown LA, you're going to see a lot of the graffiti. But local officials saying that they are going to investigate all of this and likely arrest people in the coming days as they continue to look through surveillance video and look through to see who exactly is responsible for the looting. But it is really important to point out that throughout the day, mostly peaceful protests. There's a lot of people who have gone out to try to get their voices heard, but who have been mostly peaceful. And some of these demonstrators even reporting trying to stop some of the people who are wanting to escalate things. There's usually 1 or 2 people or a group of people that just want to get more violent and want to get things escalated. And that's when you see those police officers coming in with the flashbangs and coming in with the tear gas, trying to disperse the crowds. That's when you see sort of the stampedes of people trying to get out of the way of these officers. Mayor Karen Bass, in the meantime, pleading with the federal government to stop the ICE raids. That's really at the center of this issue, at the center of the protests, because so many here in Los Angeles of minority descent, so many here of Latino or Hispanic descent, and people who are undocumented. That is just the fabric of Los Angeles. So a lot of people saying these are our friends, these are our neighbors who are getting separated from their families. Yesterday, we heard from family members of those who were detained by ICE during the raids here in Los Angeles, and they were in tears pleading with federal authorities for the release of their family members, for just essentially figuring out where they even are, because many of them have not even been able to talk to their family members who have been detained by ICE. So that really is the center of these protests, the center of this issue, and why a lot of people here in Los Angeles don't want to see the National Guard and don't want to see the Marines. So again, less violent protests yesterday. We're waiting to see what happens today as this all continues to unfold here in Los Angeles, guys.
So, Camila, as I mentioned, 2,000 more National Guard troops now being sent in by the Trump administration. The governor, the mayor, even the LAPD itself says the LAPD can handle what is in the streets of LA right now. We don't need the National Guard. So from your reporting and from what you've seen, what exactly are the National Guard troops who've been deployed? Because not all of them are out and deployed. What are they doing in this operation?
Yeah, so most of them are guarding a lot of these federal buildings and standing in front of the buildings that are run by the federal government. So you have a lot of protesters who approach these areas who want to be there to protest essentially in front of them. But you do really have LAPD and the sheriff's office really taking charge and trying to figure out, they're sort of caught in the middle and trying to keep the order. But local officials, like you mentioned, saying that the LAPD and the sheriff's office, they are big police and sheriff's departments. They can handle these kinds of protests. I've been out in the streets for multiple protests here in downtown LA. You usually end up on the 101 freeway because it's so close to the downtown area. So it's really not the first time that you see this sort of protest in Los Angeles. It obviously has escalated because of the politics behind all of this and the back and forth between the federal government and local officials. But it's not necessarily uncommon to see these protests in LA and in downtown LA. And of course, they do cause some disruption in the area. But it's not something that the LAPD hasn't seen before, and it's not something that the sheriff's department hasn't dealt with before. Willie.
NBC's Camila Bernal reporting from Los Angeles this morning. Camila, thanks so much. Let's bring in retired U.S. Army Lieutenant General Mark Hertling. His military career spans more than 3 decades of service, including as the commanding general of the United States Army Europe and the 7th Army. General, it's always good to talk to you. When I say you hear National Guard being sent in by the president, when you hear about Marines, active duty Marines being called up to a civil disobedience, to protest, to demonstrations in the streets, what does that trigger for you in your mind as a general?
It triggers a couple things, Willie, and it's a great question because we keep using the word, and the word that's being headlined is deployment of troops. They're deploying troops, whether it's the Guard or the Marines, to Los Angeles. Is that a legal thing to do, that the president can do that? Yes, it is. The president can deploy soldiers or Marines anywhere. The fact that we have to look at is, what is the mission set? What are they attempting to do? And you hit this very well in your conversation just now. What's their job? The National Guard's job, unless it's under the Insurrection Act, is to provide support for civilian authorities. In fact, that's the mission set, which means they guard buildings. That's okay. Why the White House has deployed Marines, I can only venture to say it's because they want to use the intimidation factor of Marines being there. But Marines can't do anything more than provide support to civilian authorities either. And truthfully, Marines don't train in that mission set. So that's very dangerous. When you pull Marines into that area, as you saw, there's a couple of pictures of Marines training with the shields and the batons. That's likely the first time they've ever touched those kinds of equipment. When you put them up against local citizens, civilians within the Los Angeles area, they're going to be anxious. Let's use that word as opposed to scared. They're facing their fellow citizens, and they haven't been trained in the right way that police use to disperse crowds or push crowds around. They can do the stomp and drag, as they call it, with batons and shields, but that really doesn't have an effect. Guarding buildings, fine, that's a legal order. But it's truthfully, the tipping point is going to be if the president calls an insurrection act, which is defined as trying to overthrow the government. We haven't seen any indicators of that yet. That's when it's going to become dangerous. He can deploy troops to support civilian authorities, but they don't arrest, they don't touch, they don't handle people. Secretary Hegseth put out a tweet yesterday that said something to the effect of, we're now deploying Marines and they're going to round up these criminals. I'm telling you, if that happens, that's an illegal act.
So, General, let's talk about that dynamic. You just very effectively pointed out how this has been an unfamiliar situation for Marines, some of them anxious, never been in a place like this. Also, the sight of these Marines, these National Guard members, is evocative. It's provocative for those who are there protesting, who see military, U.S. military on the streets of an American city. Tensions could certainly rise. What is your fear then of an escalation? If something just goes wrong, one side or the other, somebody makes a mistake, and then suddenly we're in a whole new place.
Yeah, I'm anxious about it, Jonathan. It could happen. Anytime you put people with guns or batons in front of people who are angry or upset about a situation, there's always, and it's a mob, there's always the potential for higher levels of damage. That concerns me, but what also concerns me is the fact that you're putting uniformed military, both National Guard and Marines, alongside federal workers, the ICE agents, the FBI agents, and then you put a third factor in of the LA police who are just trying to do their job. So it is the Northern Command commanders' requirement to coordinate all this with all of the civilian agencies, the police, the FBI, the ICE agents. And that four-star general really has to say, what am I trying to do here? What's the mission set? What are the rules of engagement? Who's doing what to who? It's a lot more complicated than just putting forces there. And there are indicators out of the White House right now that they have not done a very good job from the Defense Department in providing rules of engagement to these military personnel. The last thing I'll say is you're seeing ICE agents and others with masks on. You're not going to have military with masks, but they are going to be dressed the same way as many of these militarized police forces. So there's going to be confusion, and it's also contributing to a damage of the institution of the military, which is supposed to defend against outside agitators, enemies of the country, and instead we're putting them face to face with civilians who are using their First Amendment right to protest and use free speech.